Alright, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another map review video, something that I kind of got used to doing nowadays. I did that for Hidden Cup, and now I'm going to do that for Tupos as well. Tupos tournament, $10,000 2v2 tournament that I am hosting with all the pro teams. You might have already seen the first rounds being played on YouTube, and the second round is just kicking in. Unfortunately, I was a little bit overwhelmed with organization stuff, so I wasn't able to get to the map reviews up until now. But we'll take a look at all the maps that you can see as we planned to create one of the most diverse map pools in recent events overall. You will see an example of every genre of map, so to say. Starting off with Arabia. Arabia is the standard map of every tournament, goes into game number 1, but you cannot select as your home map. This is a more vulnerable version of Arabia, as you see, which I think is fairly reasonable, because while 1v1 tournaments often benefit from more open Arabia versions where the pressure can be applied on gold mines or forward berries whatsoever, in 2 versus 2, one player might often find themselves outnumbered by 2 opponents when the teammate is not there yet to help, and that could snowball the game out of control if the bases are not well defendable enough. So, theoretically speaking, these maps are a slightly more defendable than many other tournament Arabia scripts, but as you see, for example, over here, there are still considerable openings of the players. It's not like they are just having a very easy time voling, but this Arabia version is definitely one of the more vulnerable ones. Comes with absolutely standard resources in what is always a deserty team, so you're not going to see the green version of it, you're not going to see like a Southeast Asian version of it. This will always come with the desert team. This also means that the elephants will be there in comparison to boars. And other than that, the resources are all standard. So starting off with 2 boars, a berry patch, 3 gold mines per player, and 2 stone mines alongside a couple of wood lines around their bases. Continuing on with the Cape of Storms, a map that is very heavily bound to the Tupos franchise overall, so to say. In 2019, Tupos 1 had a map-making contest that had a prize pool of $50, and this was the winning submission by a massive margin. Cape of Storms depicts the stormy coastline of South Africa and comes with a very unique set of features. The players love it, the viewers love it, but there is a lot to talk about with this map. As you see, most of the wood is residing on the middle, so are the relics, so Lithuanians can be very decent civilization when it comes to picking those up over here. The players' spawns are very unconventional for a 2v2 setting, featuring a player that is closer to them is sort of a flank civilization role, and a player that is closer to the edge of the map and further away from the enemies, that is the pocket. So it's not like both players are evenly exposed to the opponent's aggression. One player is much more safe than the other. The starting resources are fairly standard, but there is a couple of tweaks, including 3 boars, or more precisely elephants and rhinos, which attack faster but also hold more food than boars do for each player. So instead of 2, you have 3 boars to start with. There is no berries, but there is quite a lot of huntables available for the players around their bases as well. The stone close to the bases is also non-existent. If you want to get a stone, you will have to venture all the way to the northern part of the map, which holds a huge amount of minerals, gold and stone, something that you will have to move towards in a later game. The southern part of the map, as we said, this depicts the stormy coastline of South Africa. That's why the name Cape of Storms comes from, is actually a very special water, because it does have elevation. Many of you may have not encountered elevation on water, and it's rarely used in tournaments, but we felt like this actually gives a nice aesthetic to the water element, and it also gives a nice little tweak as well. So the water hills, so to say, over here depict waves, as we technically have a storm on the sea over here, and the same hill bonuses apply on the water as they do on land. So ships that are downhills firing up hills will actually deal less damage, and ships firing down hills will deal more. There is a lot to love about this map when it comes to versatility, and there is no clearly defined meta on how to play this one, how much emphasis you put on water, because it takes quite a lot of time to get from your base to the opponent's side on water. The map itself is very, very open, so it is inviting players for some aggressive field age strategies as well. Really, I think this map is probably the hardest one to figure out, and there's so many different playstyles to play in this one. I cannot wait to see what the players have in mind for this map. Continuing on with a long-forgotten tournament map, Coast to Mountain has last been played in a big tournament, I think in 2019 or so. This map is sort of filling in the need for a Nomad start. We actually considered using Nomad as a map in the map pool, but then we decided to tweak things a little bit more and went with Coast to Mountain. So Coast to Mountain is a Nomad start map. As you see, both players on a team will start here in the middle in this little village that is full of huntables. Quite a lot of elephants, zebras are around, but not a lot of wood. Only have a couple of baobab trees, each of them holding 200 wood in here. If you venture to the right side of the map, you will find acacia trees holding 150 wood each in a fairly open region when it comes to raidability. It's not really easy to ward these acacia trees, and you don't even have huge gold patches here either. But this is a very nice combination of being close to the huntables here, close to the water, which is extremely important, and close to wood and gold as well. Speaking of water, you will have a pond that is shared between all players, having quite a lot of deep fish inside, so you will probably have to venture out and try to do some fishing for yourself, otherwise you will fall behind quite economically. As open as the right side of the map is, the left side is a lot more vulnerable. As the name suggests, this is Coast to Mountain. You have a coast on the right side, and left side is the mountain, a hilly region where you find the majority of the stone available on the map, bigger patches of gold, and also quite a lot of wood in a fairly vulnerable region. Once again, there is a lot of diversity in strategies between the players, and there is no clear way on how to play this map. You can see both players starting off at the middle, trying to capitalize on the extra food. Both of them might move to the right side, both of them might move to the left side. So this map gives an awful lot of flexibility to the players when it comes to evaluating their strategies. A map that could be favoring Lithuanians quite a bit when it comes to overall gameplay. Lithuanians love their extra food when it comes to Nomad start, but also each team is very close to 2 relics. And the 5th one is right in the middle, so Lithuanians often have the chance to pick up an extra relic as well and have 3 or so if the opponent is not contesting the map. The middle of the map also has quite a lot of huntables in there, so giving up on map control entirely might result in your opponent being able to move out for extra hunt, giving themselves quite a lot of leverage when it comes to food eco. In terms of scouting, you start with a Bactrian Camel. A Bactrian Camel is a unit that is not able to attack, but it's good at scouting. It does have auto scout on as well, or it has auto scout available, and since it has no combat value, in most cases the players will just use it in later game as an auto scout. So most players usually get to like 90-95% scouting on this map thanks to that, but you will have some sort of scouting with these units in comparison to Nomad, where you don't have any chance of scouting your opponent whatsoever unless you send a villager. Next up on our list is Eruption. This map is sort of the classical map with the gold in the middle that each tournament has. Either it is Gold Rush, Golden Pit, Golden Hill, or El Dorado. Each tournament has a map where the majority of the gold, and sometimes even the stone, is located in the middle. For this tournament, we chose to have Eruption, which is a map that you might have encountered in Red Bull Volos before, and other than that tournament, it wasn't extensively used in tournaments, so the majority of the times where you have seen Eruption, you have seen it in an Empire War setting. Even though the script did exist as a random map setting as well, it wasn't really used, so this is one of the first tournaments that uses a random map script, or not an Empire War setting, for Eruption. Eruption features a much bigger hill than standard Gold Rush is. As you see, it is a massive amount of elevation, with most of the gold coming in here in the middle, kind of representing a volcanic theme with all the volcanic ash around the Eruption. The player bases are fairly standard, so the resources that they are starting with are comparable to Gold Rush with 2 gold mines and 2 stone mines. Standard food spawns completely, but there is one tweak. They don't have deer close to their base to push. If they want to push deer, there is quite a lot hill on this ridge, but pushing them in might take some time, or if you move out, you take the risk of potentially having your units engaged by a drusher. So the players can vary between strategies over here, although fast castles seem to be the more dominant way of playing this map, as this is fairly vulnerable, although you should never count out a possible feudal aggression, because there were quite a lot of teams in the qualifiers, for example, that tried to go for like a scout and archer approach and hoping to catch the opponent off guard. Still, by mid to late castle age, you have to get a foothold in the middle, otherwise you will be in trouble when it comes to gold control. Civilizations like Tatars could be extremely powerful on this map as well, considering the massive elevation advantage, and overall positioning your army and cooperating with your teammate is extremely important over here, because one bad move with your army and you will get it absolutely annihilated with the hill advantage of the opponent. So team coordination is extremely important over here, just as much as unit control, and being able to control this ridge with your units and then establish a foothold in the middle for the gold control in late game. We move into another two pools specific map. In fact, the only tournament that used this map was two pools. I am proud to say that this map was my idea, although it is Krasini's work that made it happen. So back in 2 1 in 2019, I was suggesting new maps, and I was like, what if we put a pond in the middle of Hideout? Because Hideout itself, as you will see, is a fairly well defendable map and usually goes to late game. Opening up Hideout in one way or another, as you might have seen with Bypass as an attempt, for example, in Hidden Cup 4, is definitely an intriguing option, because the outside area still features potential for late game combat quite a bit, but if you open up the middle of the map, then you will result in quite a lot more early engagements than in comparison to Hideout, let's say. Forest Pond actually is one of the most unique maps in the map pool, because there is absolutely no clear defined meta for this one. We have seen probably less than 20 games in the history of Age of Empires on this map. Players start off with the Palisade walls surrounding their base with standard starting resources, although deer is always outside of the walls. And the back of their base will actually be part of a pond in the middle that has quite a lot of deep fish inside. The players will most likely fight for the water early on, but from what we have experienced, balancing your land and water spendings on this map is extremely crucial. If you overinvest in water, you will get castle dropped on the outside and overrun by conquistadors. If you underinvest into water, you will just get outboomed very, very heavily, leaving your back exposed as well. This is a very, very, very thin line in between defending on the outside and being able to hold the water as well, because if you lose water, suddenly the back of your base is exposed to war galleys, potential transport ships, and we shouldn't even forget about the fact that units can actually pass over here as well. There's a one tile space that they can walk on. That is why these palisade tiles are so important over here. So there is a lot of balancing that needs to be done for this map. I'm really curious how players will play this one, but this is one of those typical maps where just the decision on the strategy can win or lose you a game. We have seen some crazy games on this one already, and I cannot wait to see more with potential castle drops over here, completely trapping the players inside their own bases, or some crazy landings inside the opponent's base for towers, or potentially late game cannon galleons shelling the players' bases. There is a lot to love about this map, because this kind of merges the early aggression naval combat of a map like, let's say, Mediterranean or Baltic, and the late game outside land combat, the slow moving armies, the grindy warfare of Hideout. Next up is our closed map. As I said, we tried to put in a map from every possible genre, and one of those will be a closed map, which could either be Arena or Regicide Fortress, and we decided by Regicide Fortress for multiple reasons. Regicide Fortress has yielded some crazy games in the history of Tupo, some of the most memorable games, like for example Hera losing his king to a scout, that you could see in the trailer of Two Paws, or a crazy game between, I believe, Hera and Leary versus Viper and Taro in a Two Paws show match last year that lasted like 1.5 hours itself. Crazy games were played in previous Two Paws history on this map, and it is also a map that escalates a lot faster than Arena, giving a much more intense game for our players at the beginning instead of that slowly escalating gameplay of Arena. It is also much more open map, obviously, than Arena is, but it still has that closed aspect with the stone walls of the players. Normally, Fortress spawns with the towers around your base, but in order to encourage early aggression a little bit more, we decide to remove towers of the players. So, as you will see, the players will have a lot less vision around their base, and early aggression, potentially even something like Janissary's Mangonels, is a lot more viable in comparison to situations where towers would be protecting your base, alerting you about potential enemy movement, or just helping you defend against an early Janissary and Mangonel aggression whatsoever. Since it's Regicide, you will start with a lot more villagers than normal, so you will already have a couple of farms out, a lot more resources to start with, so the game actually escalates really fast. We also have a castle for the players, and that means that we will have a lot of unique unit civilizations being picked over here, and most importantly, a king. Losing the king means that you are defeated automatically, so you gotta be really careful not to lose that king. And even though players will use it to scout in early game, as I mentioned before, there were instances in Two Paws history where that king was sniped very early in the game, so prepare for some king snipes on this map, because there's gonna be some potential crazy games on this one. Could be late grindy games, but could also be a place where you are trying to surprise your opponent by a sudden king snipe. And so there is a lot to love once again about this map, as this will be our closed map representative for Two Paws 2. Next up is Hideout, a long-time tournament map in Age of Empires franchise history, although it seems to be more and more disliked by players based on the pick rates, for example, in Hidden Cup. It is sort of your semi-closed map. You have a fairly close setting with the walls early on and fairly well defendable bases, but it's still not as closed as, let's say, Arena or Regicide Fortress, with most of the wood being in the middle. The players start to wall around with palisades, with standard starting resources. Once again, the is on the outside. This map often is resulting in long and grindy games, as the players have a fairly easy time walling off these outside crossings and end up in late game engagements. One of the reasons why I like this map, I feel like this is an absolute dream scenario for players that love to go for a post-imperial grindy game, long game type of a gameplay over here, although it is also inviting for those players that like to go for some early aggression, like towers are more than viable on this map as well. Still, this is one of the more defendable maps overall in the map pool, and as I mentioned in the case of Forest Pond, the reason why we decided to add the pond in the middle of Forest Pond is because we felt like this Hideout map just escalates a little too slow. The game at the beginning is a little too passive, and spicing it up with a feature like a pond in the middle for water engagement can actually make this map a lot more entertaining early on. Still, this is a dream for those that like long games. Personally, I have some connections to this game or this map as well, because the first ever competitive Age of Empires game I have seen was on Hideout. So as much as I love the late game post-imperial engagements as well, I felt like this map also has a spot in the map pool, although with all the maps available, as you will see, there's a couple more that we are going to take a look at. With all those maps available, it might not be picked that frequently, as the players are seemingly moving towards more and more specialized map based on tendencies that we have seen in Hidden Cup and based on tendencies we have seen in the qualifiers of Two Paws. Moving on to Kawasan, the map that does have a Japanese theme involved. It is a map that was frequently played in tournaments, but mostly 1v1 tournaments. And in 1v1 tournaments, you may have spotted that if you have been looking at tournaments like Red Bull, for example, that you only have 2 pawns. Here for 2v2 Kawasan, you have 4 pawns. Basically, every player does have, or for every player, there is 1 pawn spawning. You will have a 2v2 setting over here. Kawasan comes with standard starting resources, and each team does have a pond that is in between the two teammates, making it a very, very secure pond. And then there is the two ponds on each side, which is in between two enemies. So one over here and one over here. The middle has quite a lot of berries on, which is an important strategical point for many reasons. One of the reasons why is because Franks often love to move out here in like late castle, early imperial, when they can actually secure this hill, which is I think the only hill that you will find on this map, so there is no hill engagements involved. This is a very, very nice defendable position, and when you secure this ridge here with castles potentially, then you will be able to drop town centers or mills here and get a lot of extra food from the berries in late game. All the relics are here in the middle as well. So the middle actually has quite a lot of nice features overall. Other than that though, this plays out fairly like a hybrid map as well. The main difference between this hybrid map and let's say a map like Coast Mountain or Forest Pond is that here the players are able to choose which ponds they want to go for. So players may not actually want to fight on water, and in comparison to let's say Coast Mountain where your opponent will be able to directly access your pond, that might not be the case over here where you can just go for a safe pond, for example. So what distinguishes Kawasan from the rest of the hybrid maps in the map pool is that you have a lot more versatility when it comes to selecting how aggressive do you want to be on water and how safe you want to have your fishing eco be. The maps are fairly defendable when it comes to volleying, although oftentimes they come with an open front. So in the majority of the cases, defending your base is possible, but not super, super easy. So this is definitely more of the open version when it comes to the starting bases. There is a lot of different strategies that you can do on this map overall, depending on how much emphasis you put on establishing your own fishing eco, trying to harass the opponent's fishing eco, or might just go for a very, very land-heavy play. So this is one of those maps where you might not necessarily have to commit that much to water fighting. There could be instances where teams just go for their own safe ponds both and try to go for an aggressive land play to try and knock one of the opponents out of the game. So with that, Kawasan is going to be one of the more interesting hybrid maps to take a look at in the tournament, something that quite a lot of teams like to select, so expect to see quite a lot of Kawasan games in two pools. As we move on, we'll take a look at the Not Socotra. This is the name of the map, inspired after the map Socotra. Not Socotra actually has a couple of changes involved, and this map was last featured, I believe, in Battle of Africa 2. It is a very, very tight and close map. So when it comes to the players, they're relatively close to each other, starting off with smaller patches of gold. The map itself is fairly vulnerable because of these three patches in the middle, and oftentimes we're seeing quite a lot of voting from the players attempting to go for fast castles. Mobility is a secondary factor on this map, I would say, because the players are so close to each other. So when you're looking for something that's actually comparable to like an arena-style gameplay, then this map might be the closest to that. This map could involve quite a lot of laming, as the players are so close to each other that stealing boards, potentially killing the opponent's huntables, could be something that is very possible. The map features quite a lot of relics all around the edge of the map, so it does have I think 8 relics overall, something that Lithuanians could exploit very, very heavily. The outside trees are actually composed of acacia trees, which do have some gaps in between them, allowing for some very nice lumber camps to be dropped by the players. It is also worth noting that Not Socotra features 0 mineable stone, and the players only start with 20 stone themselves, which means that tower rushes aren't possible. In fact, the only way to build town centers, for example, is by buying stone through using the market, and the same applies to buying or getting castles up. The only way to do that is if you buy stone. One of the reasons why I think Saracens could be a sneaky civilization for this map, having that market advantage there could be extremely helpful overall. Still, there's a lot of ways to play Not Socotra, and I feel like this is definitely one of those maps where you can deviate from the standard cavalry plus archer combination of 2v2 setups. You can go for some monk plays, you can go for like a pike and siege approach. This is definitely the map where you can shine if you don't feel confident in the standard 2v2 setting, this is definitely a map for underdogs to select, because with a well executed like Pike and Siege push or Monk and Siege push, you can potentially secure a win on this map for yourself. Moving on to Rockslide, a map that debuts in a random map setting. The first time ever this map will be used for a random map. This map actually had its first tournament showing in Red Bull Vololo 3, where it was used in an Empire Wars setting. Rockslide is going to feature wood in the middle, just like Hideout, but a lot less wood and easier to chop through, as the players start in these sheltered little corners with standard starting resources, but with a couple of tweaks as well. For example, a mill already spawning for the players. There is also shorefish close to the players. A fun aesthetic about that is that you can find the shorefish very easily by looking for the barrels on the shoreline. So every time you see a barrel, there is a shorefish right next to it. So that's one way to see where you can actually drop your dock, because it is very possible to drop docks over here on this shallowy region. As we have seen in Red Bull World 3, one of the better strategies here could be to try and cut off your opponent's town center from the outside region, which holds most of the gold. As you see, the starting bases of the players do not have gold. If you want to grab gold, there is quite a lot on the outside, but you will have to potentially fight for it on water. There's absolutely no defined meta for 2v2 Rockslide in random map setting. The only setting that this map has been played in tournaments was 1 versus 1 with Empire Wars. So literally anything can happen on this map. This is definitely a map for the teams that like to strategize, like to come up with new and innovative ideas on how to play this one. I think water control does have to be a factor over here, so trying to get a couple of early galleys out and trying to cut off your opponent from moving villagers from the town center to gold mines could be something. It is also worth noting that most of the stone, in fact all the stone, is actually in the corners on these 4 hills here, and they're actually cut away from the players with a line of trees. So getting early stone access isn't very possible, so unique unit civilizations or tower rushes aren't really viable over here. It's more about a combination of how much you invest on water and potentially try to lock your opponent inside his base, and how much you potentially invest into your own eco, expanding it here on the outside, getting to that crucial stone and pushing it to late game. This map definitely has the tendency to go into late game, and it could deliver one of the most surprising, unconventional games of the tournament. Team Acropolis has some interesting history in this tournament, because originally I didn't really want to include it in my tournaments, because I'm not really a fan of Acropolis, even though I see it as a completely legitimate tournament map. I myself hate to play it, and I'm not necessarily a fan of seeing it, but the success of 2v2 World Cup and the many good games that Team Acropolis delivered during 2v2 World Cup last November convinced me that there's a lot to love about the 2v2 Team Acropolis setting, and we decided to implement this. This is one of the other somewhat open maps, so to say, because technically this is sort of classified as an open map, with those 3 lines being very, very thin and small, potentially giving access to the players for raiding. Although it seems like in 2021, the players decided to just wall their bases all the way around and often go for fast castle plays. So you will see usually a combination of one player going for an aggressive play like scouts or archers, trying to make sure that the opponent won't push them, and the other player going for fast castle play. So I have to admit that this map is playing out a lot more passive than I initially expected, and I was hoping to see like prolonged feudal age engagements with archers, scouts, as they are trying to hit the opponent's open bases, but it seems like the players decided to go for a much more defensive approach, capitalizing on the fact that they are sheltered on a hill here and using these 3 lines to wall their bases off, which is not an easy thing to do, but it is very possible to be done. So oftentimes Team Acropolis also goes into a late game scenario. We have seen some crazy Team Acropolis games already in the qualifiers. I will not spoil anything, but we have seen even elite cannon galleons on this little pond in the middle, which by the way does have some fish, so theoretically it's possible to move out for this one, although the value of this one is very doubtful. Something that I would like to point out though, which is a difference compared to Team Acropolis that was used in 2v2 World Cup, is that you have some extra boars down here. You see that there's a couple of boars that do not belong to our blue player here. This is the 2 boars for blue player, and there is 2 more boars over here. So So far, we haven't really seen players exploiting this, but there is some flexibility when it comes to this map. If you're willing to take the risk of moving out for a board that's this far, and that should be doable with Loom, or especially now that you are going to be running uphill, so the board is attacking the Voyager uphills, potentially some scouts blocking, then those boards can give you a very, very nice early boost to your economy. Or alternatively, when you reach Castle Age and start expanding towards this valley here, dropping town centers close to woodlines, gold mines or so, these boars can provide a very, very nice and steady food income, which is an extremely important thing when it comes to kickstarting your economy in early Castle Age, as you just now invested into free town centers, you often struggle to afford producing villagers on all three of them. Having access to a couple of huntables like this can provide an extremely useful boost to your food eco in early Castle Age, allowing you to have a much more consistent production of villagers when it comes to early Castle Age. Last but not least, one of the more controversial maps of the tournament, Team Islands. There were a lot of complaints that, oh boy, Team Islands can stall out in late game, boring this, boring that. But as I said, Tuples is striving to make the map pool as diverse as possible to accommodate every type of player, every type of play style. We have seen open maps like Cape of Storms, Nomad Start like Coast to Mountain, closed hybrids like, for example, Forest Pond, or open hybrids like Coast to Mountain or Cape of Storms. We have seen semi-closed maps like Hideout, closed maps like Regicide Fortress. I think it is legitimate to add water here as well. I can see the players, or I can see people saying, hey, the fact that it is in the game doesn't mean that you have to add it. But as I said, Tuples is striving on having an as balanced map pack as possible, accommodating every playstyle, making sure that every type of player does have a map to select. This is extremely important from the perspective that if you have a map from each different playstyle, each different sort of genre of maps, that allows underdogs to potentially upset or at least make series much more competitive against stronger teams. So if you would just play Arabia all the time or Gold Rush all the time, the top teams would most likely stomp the weaker teams. But having a diversity in the map pool allows the weaker teams to surprise the opponents on maps like not Socotra or so. And from that perspective, we found it legitimate to include a map like Team Islands that doesn't really have a lot of alternatives overall in competitive Age of Empires. Team Islands also delivered a lot of fun games in 2v2 World Cup with quite a lot of landings, and I'm looking forward to seeing something like that over here. On Team Islands, you start with standard starting resources, which is a difference from Islands, where you start with 2 big gold patches instead of 1 big and 2 smaller ones, 2 stone patches. And the other main difference between Islands and Team Islands is that there is no neutral island in the middle. In the Tuples version of Team Islands, each player can pick up 2 relics that are close to their bases. So each island has a combined number of 4 relics for a total of 8 overall in between the players. The gold and stone spawn has been balanced in between the islands, so that was a bigger criticism towards Team Islands sometime around 2v2 World Cup or so, I believe, and we did our best to make sure that the same amount of gold and stone spawns on both islands, although I think we had one bug where it didn't actually occur. That was just a bug instead of like a actual feature. It's not really a feature, but you get what I mean. Technically, if all goes well with the script, then we should have the same amount of gold and stone on the players' islands. So there's a lot of ways that Team Islands can go with how much you put into a landing. Oftentimes, the meta nowadays is a landing with one player on the opposing team going for landing defense or so. So 2 players going for water is quite rare. But there's a lot of things that distinguishes Islands from Team Islands, and even though in Hidden Cup we could see quite a lot of Islands games stalling out, Team Islands delivers a different playstyle with the landing possibility, with the possibility to establish trade with the teammate, and that trade, or the quality of the trade, the amount of trade cards you have, could heavily influence your late game gameplay. The team with the better established trade will be much more successful on water. So while there is definitely a certain amount of people that dislike Team Islands for what it is, I believe that in order to make the map pack complete and make it a completely like legitimate all-around tournament map pack, the implementation of team islands is justified, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some very competitive war engagements over here for those that love it. With that, we finished our overview on the tuples maps, so hopefully you have enjoyed. This video actually ended up being a 35 minutes video or so, even though I wanted it to be like 10 minutes, but you know, I like to talk a lot about this one. So in case you are interested in tuples, you can either check the YouTube here, which I will use to upload the casts I had on Twitch, but if you want to watch the games live, then head on to my Twitch channel, which I will have a link in the description of this video as well, and you'll be able to catch the show live. All the top teams will be competing for a prize pool of $10,000 sponsored by Microsoft, and yeah, hopefully, so far, the feedback on the tournament has been extremely positive. The players and the viewers like the diversity of the civilizations. If you do not know what the tuples format is about, we'll have a video on that soon as well. But other than that, I think for now, I'm just going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for taking a look at this map overview, and hope to see you either as a viewer here on YouTube for the games I casted, or potentially meeting you on Twitch, where we'll have the entire tournament casted live over the next couple of weekends, with the second round starting on the 9th of April. We will have the group stage second round, with the 17th and 18th of April, we'll have the group stage deciders and the quarterfinals, and the 24th of April will mark the day of the semifinals, and 25th of April will be the grand finals. So if you have the chance to do so, tune in to take a look at some games on this maps, especially if you like this map pool. Thank you so much for watching. If you have some thoughts about the map pool, I think it's great if you leave your comments down below the video. We will probably not alter the map pool of this tournament, regardless of what is said about it, because it would be quite unconventional and, well, quite unfortunate even to modify the map back in the middle of the tournament. But if you have any kind of feedback related to this map pool, then feel free to leave it down below in the description or in the comment section, and we will take those comments into consideration when it comes to designing map packs for our future tournaments. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.